Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I am so sorry that we are running a little bit behind due to technical difficulties, but I believe we are getting it all situated. But we are going to go ahead and get started. But I want to welcome everyone to tonight's AFTD Advocacy Training Webinar, Making a Difference, Become an AFTD Advocate. My name is Megan Busby, AFTD's Director of Advocacy and Volunteer Engagement, and I want to thank you all for being here with us tonight. We are going to get started right away in just a minute, but before we do, I did want to highlight a few things for you. If you, as an attendee, encounter any technical issues with the webinar, please write a message in the Q&A box that's located at the bottom of your screen, and someone working behind the scenes will do their best to address those issues. Time permitting, we will conduct a brief Q&A session at the end of the webinar. To submit your question, please use that same Q&A button below on the bottom of your screen and submit your question in there. We will try to answer as many as we can get to, and you can actually add your question at any time throughout the webinar. You do not need to wait until the very end to submit. Additionally, this webinar is being recorded and archived for later viewing on AFTD's YouTube page. Next slide, please. Before I introduce our speakers, I did want to let everyone know that registration is open for the 2024 AFTD Education Conference taking place in Houston on Friday, May 3rd of this year. This annual conference brings together persons affected by FTD, caregivers, experts in the field, and other healthcare professionals for a full day of learning and connection. If you're unable to make it in person in Houston, you can register for the free live stream of the conference, and many of the sessions will be recorded for later viewing. You may register by visiting the website here displayed on your screen. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenters that are here with us this evening, starting with myself. As I mentioned, I am Megan Busby, AFTD's Director of Advocacy and Volunteer Engagement. I have spent many years as an advocate for people with serious diseases and unmet needs, and have more than 20 years of experience in advocacy relations, strategic partnerships, marketing, and communications. Here at AFTD, I work to develop and support our advocacy strategy, grow a national advocate network, and expand our volunteer base. I am joined tonight by my colleague, Matt Sharp, who is AFTD's Advocacy Manager. Matt has been with AFTD since December 2009, so a very long time. And after earning his Master of Social Service degree from Bryn Mawr College's Graduate School of Social Work and Social Research, he made a career transition to social services from natural sciences. In his role here at AFTD, he is responsible for informing AFTD's advocacy strategy and for the coordination and development of all AFTD advocacy activities. Thank you for being here tonight with me, Matt. We are also joined by Deb Scharper, who joined AFTD's National Volunteer Network in 2015 and became an AFTD Ambassador in 2019. As an ambassador, Deb works to raise awareness and educate others in Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin's La Crosse region, while being an advocate and caregiver for her loved one with FTD. Throughout her volunteer tenure, Deb has led a support group for AFTD, brought together others affected by FTD through meet and greets, and continues to raise funds for AFTD's mission through her annual Crusade for the Cure golf tournament. And finally, we are joined tonight by Mike Splaine, who is the owner and principal of Splaine Consulting. He has been working in health and long-term care since 1988 and has a proven track record of helping organizations like AFTD achieve success in advocacy for health and long-term care issues. Mike established Splaine Consulting after a more than 20-year career on the public policy and advocacy staff of the Alzheimer's Association. He is known worldwide for bringing the real face of a problem into the policy arena to yield success with policy influencers. Next slide, please. So, before we get started officially into our content and dig a little deeper, we wanted to launch an intro question, a quick little polling question to gauge, where you are with your understanding of public policy advocacy. So please, we'll wait just a minute maybe a minute and a half to allow folks to answer this question of how would you describe your current understanding of what public policy advocacy is? Yeah, I don't even know what that term means. I'm a beginner, but I'm interested in learning more. I already know enough to get by, and I am practically an expert. I see a lot of responses coming in. Give it, 20 more seconds, and we'll close this out. All right, I think, yes, we are good here. Let's share these results. It really looks like we have a lot of beginners here, which is great. That's kind of what I was hoping for. And we have a few people that know enough to get by, and it looks like we have one expert. So welcome, we welcome everyone. And I don't even know what that term means. It looks like we have a few people that are also, have never heard of that. And that's totally fine. That's really what we're here for tonight. We are hoping that after tonight, you will feel much more confident in what it means what public policy advocacy means and what it means to be an advocate for AFTD. We'll go to the next slide. So in order to provide you the tools for feeling more confident and comfortable with advocacy, we are really breaking it down tonight into very basic terms and understanding. You will hear from me first. I am starting things off talking about, what is advocacy? What is policy? Why do we advocate? How do we advocate? What are the different ways we can advocate? And then you'll hear from Matt, who will really break down the legislative process and talk about how a bill becomes a law. You may remember that, famous ditty of I'm just a bill, as I'm only a bill, sitting here on Capitol Hill from elementary school. And we are going to either get a refresher of that, or maybe this is the first time that you're learning about what that legislative process looks like. And then we'll hear from Deb Scharper, who I introduced earlier, who's really going to highlight the importance of and the power of sharing your personal story while advocating. And then we'll also have Mike Splaine, who will be speaking about how important it is to talk about the related dementias in a world where, as Alzheimer's is very well known and much more prevalent. And so how can we raise our voices among that? So what is advocacy? First of all, there are many types of advocacy. Public policy advocacy is what we're here to talk about specifically, but there's other types of advocacy too. And I'm guessing most of you, if not all of you, advocate all the time, almost every day, whether you're advocating for yourself or your loved one living with FTD. You are advocating, right? You are raising awareness. You're speaking to others about what FTD is, and that is all advocacy as well. Specifically, public policy advocacy is the act of promoting a particular cause or idea, often with the goal of influencing decision-making or policy. We come together, right? It's bringing all of these voices together, everyone that's here on this call, other voices in our community, healthcare professionals, friends and family, all coming together to try to change public policies, laws, and rules that impact this community. Advocacy really assumes that there is a problem that needs fixing, and it's a way to drive or affect that change. And it really also bridges the gap between constituents, who are you, and decision makers, which are the legislators, members of Congress, policymakers, or regulatory bodies such as FDA, NIH, which is the National Institute of Health. Next slide, please. So, what is policy? Well, policy and advocacy go very much hand in hand. You have advocacy assuming that there's a problem, and that is the way to drive or affect that change. And then policy is really the approach to solve that problem or issue. So once the policies are being developed, that's where advocates play a really critical role in promoting the adoption or implementation of that policy or legislation. So in other words, policy are ways in which we can develop, we can either as a community, we can bring forward policies that we think would better the lives of those living with FTD, or there's potentially already policies or legislation that has been introduced that we can advocate for that would also better the lives of those that are affected by FTD. Next slide, please. So why do we advocate? You know, I think you're all here for the same reason, have a really strong interest in making a difference. And that is because, as you know, there is no cure for FTD. There's currently no approved treatments or FDA approved treatments. You know, 7 to 10 years of progression with FTD and an average of 3.6 years to receive an accurate diagnosis from the start of symptoms. And so these are the reasons that we are here tonight, right? And that we continue to advocate and fight for policies that will hopefully help improve, you know, in these areas. So specifically, we advocate to increase public awareness. As you know, FTD is rare. Oftentimes people have never heard of it. And that's not just the public, that's also, you know, healthcare professionals and then especially the members of Congress, right, that are not aware of this disease. And so we advocate to increase that public awareness so that we then can have increased funding for research and we can expand state-supported services that may already exist or, you know, introduce state-supported services, as well as the caregiving support and services. Next slide, please. And so how do we advocate? Well, there's many different ways to advocate. The most important thing to keep in mind, though, is all about relationship building. So as we begin to, you know, to advocate and talk more and increase awareness around FTD, the one important way we can do that is by building relationships with those policymakers and decision makers. So it's, you know, calling your members of Congress, emailing them, setting up face-to-face visits with them in the district where you live, your state capital, if we're talking about state members of Congress, in DC, you know, coming to DC and meeting with your, meeting with your legislators there in DC. But really building that relationship, introducing yourself as their constituent, introducing FTD, introducing AFTD, and continuing that relationship. It is never a one and done situation. So, you know, patience, persistence, persuasion, the 3 Ps, right? So it's really important to, as you build those relationships, to have patience in building that, but also be persistent. I would add a 4th one, but polite, you know, persistent but polite, and use the power of persuasion, which really comes from sharing your personal story with those that legislate. That is really how legislators make their decisions. They are moved by personal stories that are shared with them by their constituents, and then they want to, you know, take action to make change. And finally, just the most direct form of advocacy is what we call lobbying. And that just means taking a position on a specific piece of legislation. And we'll get into a little bit later, Matt will talk about the current pieces of legislation that we are following and advocating for on our website and how you can get involved specifically with that action alert or piece of legislation. Next slide, please. Well, it's now my personal honor to introduce my colleague, Matt Sharp, who is going to speak with you all about the legislative process.
Thank you very much, Megan. Thank you all for being here tonight. So you can go to the next slide, Matt. What I'm going to do in this next section is really sort of give a real general overview of this process. We've already mentioned the Schoolhouse Rock song, so that's probably where everybody first heard about this idea of a bill becoming a law. And I'm going to be talking mainly about the federal government, federal U.S. government. This general process does also apply to states. You know, there will be differences in the details when it comes to state government, but it's the same general overall process. So I will be, like I said, sort of just trying to lay a foundation, a basis for all of us to start from. But even if we didn't go any further than this one slide, I would say that everybody here is already knows enough to become an effective advocate, because to be an advocate, you really don't have to know about the intricacies and the details about the legislative process. What you really need to know about is your own experience. And that's what the legislators really need to hear from you. So sometimes this can seem intimidating, but just remember that you are the expert of what you have experienced related to this disease. And again, that's what legislators need to understand from you as an advocate. Next slide. So this is a little schematic so that we've laid out about basically how the steps that are gone through for a bill to become a law. All bills start as an idea, like we said. Someone sees a problem and they make that, the first step is to make a legislator, their elected official, aware of that problem. In order to do that, really the two things that people need to do is make the legislator understand that the problem and the solution is generalizable, that meaning that it affects more than just one person, but also there has to be a policy solution. There has to be a way that a legislator can change or create a law that would address the issue, because not all problems people face have policy solutions. So that's important to remember. So the next step is, once the legislator is aware of the issue, they will introduce the bill into their respective House, either the Senate or the House of Representatives. Once a bill is introduced, it's assigned a number. In the House, that number will always start with an H and an R, and in the Senate, it will always start with an S. So if you've ever seen those letters in front of the bills, that's what they designate. And whichever chamber the bill is introduced into first is the House of Origin. Overall, I just want to say that there are two general types of bills. There are authorization bills and appropriation bills. An authorization bill really establishes or continues or modifies an existing agency or program, whereas an appropriation bill provides spending and funding for the agencies and programs that already exist and that were previously authorized. Appropriation bills, and this is a quirk of the U.S. Congress, is that appropriation bills in the U.S. have to start in the House. And then an authorization bill can be time limited or not. One of the ones we're focused on currently, the National Alzheimer's Project, is a time limited bill. But some authorizations, once they pass, they're permanent. Whereas appropriations are typically done on an annual cycle. The most familiar, of course, is the federal budget cycle. So the next step, once the bill is introduced, it's going to be sent to a committee. And this is an important time to intervene. Once the bill is sent to a committee, we can target those committee members for advocacy around the issue. And then the first thing a committee usually does will be to assign the bill to a subcommittee. Once in a subcommittee, the bill can be scheduled for discussion or not. And if it's not scheduled, it then dies. A subcommittee can hold hearings to gather opinions and inputs from experts and stakeholders, such as yourselves. And again, this is another important opportunity for advocates to intervene. The subcommittee can make amendments and then vote on them, or actually just in some cases simply rewrite the bill entirely. When the subcommittee votes, the vote is whether or not to send the bill back to the full committee. And again, that's another time when a bill can actually die. So a bill can be introduced, sent to subcommittee, and never get any further than that. Then the next step, if it is passed out of the subcommittee, basically the committee then can go through all the same steps. And again, this is another important opportunity for advocacy, targeting the specific committee members, but it's also another time when a bill can simply not go any further if a committee does not vote that bill back out to the floor. So if the next step again is if a bill does get out of committee, the full Senate or House then votes on it and whether to pass it. So once a bill is passed in one chamber, it then has to go through the other chamber. So whichever one was not the chamber of origin, and steps 1 through 5 are repeated again, unless sometimes there is an identical bill going through both chambers at the same time. So once the bill does get through both chambers, it is then sent to what's called a conference committee. The conference committee then just has to reconcile the two different versions of the bill. Once they do that, the conference committees, again, there's another good target for advocacy, of course, targeting those conference committee members. So what the conference committee then does is that the committee includes members from both chambers, the House and the Senate. They discuss the differences between the two versions of the bill, reconcile those differences, then rewrites the bill in a form that they think will pass, again, both House and Senate, and then vote on it. So again, there's another opportunity for a bill to die. After the conference committee passes the rewritten bill, they write a report that contains the rewritten bill and an explanation of how it worked out the differences between the original two versions. Then finally, step 8, we get to the final vote. And again, yet another time, important opportunity to mobilize advocates and intervene. First, the conference committee report with the rewritten bill is sent to the House for a vote. If it passes the House, then it's sent to the Senate for a vote. And if it passes the Senate, then it finally gets sent to the president. Of course, if it does not pass neither House, again, there's that bill will then die. So once you think it gets to the presidential action, step 9, we're in the home stretch. But the president then has 4 options. Of course, they can simply sign the bill and it becomes law. Or the president can let the bill sit on their desk for 10 days without signing it. If after those 10 days, Congress is still in session, then the bill just becomes a law. If Congress is not in session at the end of those 10 days, then the bill dies. And that's what's called a pocket veto. So essentially a president, if he has the timing right, can veto a bill by doing nothing. And then, of course, a president can veto a bill. And if that happens, then there's still an opportunity for it to be passed, but it's got to get voted on by 2/3 of both houses in order to pass. So again, there's a lot of opportunities for intervention here, but there's also a lot of opportunities for bills not to get any further. So it's always important to remember that the vast majority of bills that are introduced in any session of Congress are never going to make it all the way through. And that's just sort of a fact of the process. That doesn't mean it's not worth advocating on, because becoming a law really is just one potential outcome, and it's not the only outcome that's positive. All right, so next slide. So again, you don't have to be a legislative expert to go through to take part in this process. Again, what lawmakers really need to hear from you as constituents is your experience and what you have learned about the disease through caring for a loved one or living with a disease. And it's very easy to become cynical on this whole process and just disillusioned about the way government works. But it's important to also remember that we always hear more about the conflicts and the failures than we do about the successes. There's really a lot more successes, small successes, than there are conflicts. They just don't get talked about as much. So there's 2 examples I want to share from my most recent experiences with doing legislative visits down in DC. In October, I participated in what was called the Family Caregiver Summit, held by the National Caregiver Alliance. We were advocating around something called the RAISE Act and the National Family Caregiver Strategy. I was part of a group that met with the both PA senators as well as my representative, Dwight Evans, and Representative Fitzpatrick. In all of our meetings, the issue or topic of a National Family Caregiver Month was brought up. That wasn't actually part of our legislative asks that day. It was just something that kind of came up in conversation. And then on October 31st, literally a couple weeks after I was in DC, President Biden issued a proclamation declaring November 2023 as National Family Caregiver Month. And so I'm not saying there was a direct connection between what happened while I was in those meetings, but there definitely wasn't an accident either. So it was pretty neat to actually see that positive outcome, even though that wasn't even the purpose of our visits in the first place. And again, more recently, this past February, I was in DC as part of Rare Disease Week with an organization called the Rare Disease Legislative Advocates. Again, doing legislative visits with our PA senators and representatives. There was a woman in the group I was with who was in a wheelchair, and she had a couple really horrible experiences flying with her wheelchair. At one point, she actually looked out the window while she was in her seat. They wouldn't allow her to bring her wheelchair into the cabin, so she had to check it. And as she was sitting there waiting to take off, she actually looked out her window and saw the baggage handlers drop her chair and damage it to the point where it wasn't usable. And then after that, there was no way for her to hold the airline accountable. They wouldn't even pay for repairs to her wheelchair, which is her primary source of mobility. It's the way she got around. So again, this was just in February of this year. And on February 29th, Secretary Buttigieg announced a proposed rule change to Department of Transportation regulations that would ensure passengers who use wheelchairs are accommodated in cabin during flights. And makes it easier for them to hold airlines accountable when they do damage to these valuable pieces of equipment that people rely on. So again, it was really uplifting to actually see the advocate in action in this case, and see how that again played out. And in that situation wasn't even a law change. It was simply a regulation change. So even though your asks may not get acted on the way you want them to do, advocating is still important because again, the experts in the legislative process are the people you're talking to, are our legislators. And for the most part, they're doing what they do because they want to help people. And if there is a way for them to if they can find a way to help, they will. And that may not be through legislation. So next slide. And with that, I'd like to introduce Deb Scharper and to share some of her experiences telling her story in legislative visits.
All right, can you hear me? It looks like we don't have it on the screen, my face, but I don't care. Can you hear me? All right, I'm going to share my story. Meet Tommy. We had been married for 24 years, and your journey has been changing dramatically. In the beginning, I was his care partner, helping him make decisions about how we wanted to get the answers we needed. As many of you know, it took many physicians and different diagnoses until we reached the definite diagnosis of FTD at the age of 44 in 2015. Then the roles changed to a caregiver. It was so heartbreaking. The moment was when I had to call daily from work to make sure he was up, took meds, ate, showered, and be ready for work. I never thought in my 40s I would be fighting for my loved one with dementia to get the proper care he needed and having to tour memory units, making sure that that'd be a good move for better quality care. Then we entered the care partner stage. I must rely on the nursing home for his daily needs. I am now his voice and advocate. Today, I'm honored to say I am his care fighter. Due to our lack of beds for young dementia patients, he is now 2.5 hours away from any of his loved ones. I just pray and must trust he's getting the care he needs daily. This is what has given me the fire and desire to make our representatives know what is going on in our state to families with dementia and how we're lacking care and facilities. We need to do so much more in education. We need to train all staff about how FTD behaves, change the mindset, have facilities cater to the patient's routines and not the staff's. My dream would be have facilities built that can cater and handle young FTD patients. It would be so beneficial for the parent, patient, and the staff. Develop a facility that allows endless circle hallways and even include a skyway that they can feel they're outside enjoying the weather. Build a home where residents can garden, do other activities. We have to stop taking away the purpose and sense of worth from the dementia person. This would be so beneficial, having a way to burn off energy and anxiety instead of them using many drugs to calm him and become a zombie and make it so that it's easier for the staff. Finding your audience. My purpose in life now is to bring awareness to help families going through this storm. This is my only way to fight against FTD that currently has no cure. At this stage of my loved one's disease, all I can do is watch the decline and meet him where he's at in the moment. This disease has brought many tears and unknowns to our family. The impact has changed my outlook on life. I am so thankful for AFTD bringing more awareness to FTD, but we all need to come together and advocate for our loved ones, be their voice. If we would have gotten that diagnosis years earlier, we would understand what was happening and treasure each moment in life with less stress. I could have given him the last few years of living at home one of quality, meet him at his ability. During this time, the kids and I were reaching out to our area Alzheimer's support group. We would attend a few of the support group meetings, but we did not get the level of support we needed due to the age group we were in. Most of our members were adults taking care of their elderly parents and just at the different journey than we were on. That is when I reached the internet and found AFTD. I was blessed to connect with a great volunteer coordinator and I jumped in with both feet. Within a year of AFTD, we had 2 FTD support groups in Iowa, 1 in Northern and in Des Moines, and then we ventured even to South Dakota, a service we terribly needed for young families going through FTD. I am honored to say I went from a local volunteer to a support group facilitator, then a volunteer regional coordinator. Today, my role is an Iowa AFTD Ambassador and facilitating a support group online. The kids and I also, as you know, created a golf tournament for fundraising to honor their dad and never forget his role in our lives. In the last 7 years, we've raised $60,000 and all the proceeds go to research. Now, finding your partners. I've joined forces with the Alzheimer's Association. I'm a volunteer with them also as a support group facilitator. They refer families to attend our Alzheimer's AFTD Zoom along with posting our monthly meetings. By being in a dual society volunteer, I can find more ways to reach the families that need help and bring them hope and possibly a passion to continue the advocacy. The benefit of joining your state chapter is that you can find more conferences, support meetings, and in your own backyard. AFTD is a great association, but with limited resources and staff to know what each state is offering. We need to seek out opportunities for ourselves, then take them to your volunteer coordinator to help with the next steps. One thing I totally recommend is to join the Alzheimer Awareness Day at your state capitol. These usually are in March before the bills are passed and then signed. I've attended the last few years. I do my presentations, though, a bit differently when I ask to speak to my representatives. I bring red folders and place the information that Alzheimer's Association has and about the bill and the session, what we want passed, along with information about FTD. And most importantly, do not forget your swag. You need that wristband and pen to give to your representatives. I also wear red that day. I know it should be purple, but remember, we are supporting the other dementia category. I want them to see a different color from the sea of purple and make it a memorable conversation with a lasting impression. Let me give you one heads up though. There are times that you may ask to speak to 5 representatives and not one leaves the chamber. Please know you are still making a difference. You just write a note on the folder and give it to the runner for that chamber, and they'll place it in your district representative's desk. Then you pray, they open it, and you at least educated one more person that can help make a change. Being part of both organizations gives me opportunities to do dual table settings and attend conferences to get in front of the physicians and nursing home companies. Another partner that I found is in the research field. I joined with Elector to bring awareness to families with genetic variant FTD. We shot a short video that was released when they did the Learn FTD campaign. This allowed us to honor Tommy and give a glimpse of what happened in our journey and hopefully empower others to look into research and not be afraid to share your story. Knowledge is power. If I can help one future generation, that is my goal. I will never forget when Tommy was talking. One day he was adamant to talk to his kids. He wanted to call them, and he told them so many great stories, and he had heart-to-heart conversations about fighting and never giving up. After those calls, I felt it was so powerful. I said, "Hey, what's your advice for me?" He simply said with a tilt of his head, "Just be Deb, you'll be fine." Then we talked about finding a cure, treatment for our kids. This danged disease has taken too many generations of our family from ALS and FTD, or a combo of both. Also this year, at our all FTD research appointment with Dr. Beauvais at Mayo Clinic, he brought up to the kids what it takes to have these research studies. He told them how important advocacy work is for funding to help physicians and companies continue this fight for treatments. I was so glad he was also expressing the importance of advocacy. Next, meeting your legislators. Now is the perfect time to make your voice to the local, state, and national levels. They will be doing town hall meetings, campaigning, and wanting to hear where you feel the need must change. I'm in rural Iowa. I follow my legislator online. They usually have at least one meeting in our county a year, if not more. And then at the election year, that really makes for more opportunities. I always have that red folder filled with FTD material and swag. Running for Senate. Remember the comment, "Not one person came out to meet me"? I didn't know that would happen. I was so angry. I felt defeated that year. I went up to the balcony of the state and House representative gallery. I saw my representative having a conversation with another representative. I was appalled. I took the day off work, drove 2.5 hours each way to talk to this person. They knew it was Alzheimer's Day on the Hill. How could they not have respect enough to at least say hello and listen to my 60-second spiel? That was the moment I will never forget. I drove home. I called my husband and I told him I was running for Senate. At the time, we had 3 kids living in the house, 2 in high school and 1 in middle school. He asked if I would just wait until the kids graduated or the next election year. I couldn't. Something was lit in my soul and I had to be a voice. It worked out in my benefit, however. 1 week after making that decision, COVID hit. So all we had to do was campaign online, make phone calls, have open-aired park visits, etc. I really don't know how I could have done more with working full-time. My campaign consisted of our lack of nursing homes and memory units. This is one of my missions, to bring awareness to needing options for our young loved ones afflicted with FTD. Just remember, once you're done completing your spend down and qualify for state care, Medicaid, the reimbursement funding is so bad that nursing home and memory units limit the amount of Medicaid beds that facilities will allow. This cuts families' options, I would say, tenfold. Then if you get labeled of having behavioral issues, those options for homes are even limited. The last thing I want to express to families and all caretakers and physicians, we have to listen and give our loved one the best quality care. Remember, once diagnosed with FTD, it's not quantity at this point. We need to make sure it's quality. I beg you to be an advocate for your loved ones. If you feel that things are not right, keep knocking on doors and make someone listen to you. I felt so strongly about needing to make a change for our young adults' lack of facilities and care options. I ran for Iowa Senate District 26 with the platform of improving access with affordable health care for all Iowans. This includes increasing access to mental health services and addressing serious problems with privatized Medicaid system. I did not win this election, but I did get 30% of the vote. In my world, this was a huge win for me. I had an audience that I could share my journey with and media outlets to bring more awareness to my mission. Thank you so much for attending this webinar to see how you too can be an advocate.
Gobsmacked. Thank you, Deb. She exemplifies the fact that an advocate, the word advocate comes from the Latin avocare, one who gives voice in the cause of another. What I'd like to talk about today is your unique role, not only in telling your story, but making it make the point, make it make several points. Your role as an advocate with public officials, sometimes and others, maybe even in your own family, is as a teacher. And I've lived with a teacher for 48 years, married to her. And I could tell you that repetition is also at the heart of teaching. To really get through sometimes thick skulls, it takes more than one time telling a message. So I want to talk a little bit about why FTD advocates are in a unique place to speak up on related dementias. Can we go to the first slide? Unaided public awareness polls. There's a big gobbledygook. Basically, it means going out to the general public and asking them questions. And in unaided public awareness polls, dementia is equal in the public's mind to Alzheimer's disease, and Alzheimer's disease equals dementia. It's important that you have an opportunity to talk about the fact that dementia is an umbrella term. It describes a series of symptoms, and that there are several causes of dementia, including Alzheimer's, but also vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, and frontal temporal dementia, the red people. Thank you, Deb, for that. You can see I got the gang colors going tonight. So you are in a unique position to educate, to draw into the story the fact that all dementia is not Alzheimer's disease. I think equally important, you're in a very unique position to counter another fact in general circulation, that when people hear the word dementia, their brain immediately goes to the fact that this must be somebody who is necessarily old, in a nursing home or care community, that they are at the end stage, they are completely disabled and unable to make their way in the world, even with support. You're in a great position to educate, to draw into the deeper story, to teach and repeat over and over again that all dementia is this description of a group of symptoms, that there are unique causes of dementia, and that people live with dementing illnesses, dementing neurocognitive disorders a long time before the end stages of needing full care, for which they need a care fighter. Deb, I'm going to steal that word. A care fighter that would demand that we meet his ability. We've done a lot of work in the last few years supporting people living alone with dementia as with an online community, and a lot of profound things get said by our people living alone with dementia. And one is this, that what disables me is what you think dementia means, not what dementia really is. Next slide. We have a few international visitors. I saw a Canadian waving a maple leaf or some other emblem of his beautiful country. Just point out that in most of the world, the issue is dementia and the rapid increase in all dementias worldwide. This slide is from the World Health Organization, is particularly going to hit lower and middle income countries over the next few years. Another fact to think about as we think that we are part of a global community. Next slide. So AFTD, FTDs are a related but different story. Here's some talking points that I think make sense. And the first is that we can communicate that people with FTD are generally younger than those with symptomatic Alzheimer's disease. We're in a different place in life. We're in a different time in our lives. Many people with FTD, as you heard Deb, have teenage or younger children. It's a different time in our lives than persons in their 70s and 80s. Always able to communicate that there are just impossible barriers to a formal diagnosis. And the story frequently is multiple bad diagnoses before sorting out somebody into understanding that they have FTD or a related disorder. I think we have a point to make that when we base eligibility for public programs solely on age, and many of us have been through this fight with aging organizations, that we are in fact disenfranchising and disabling and not serving a whole community of people when we use age as an arbitrary eligibility criteria. We have a unique story to tell about genetics, and as we charge forward toward more gene-based medicine, we have an opportunity to tell a story and to make a point, to educate, to advocate that protection from discrimination based on genetics, based on genetic tests or genetic information is an important difference between FTD and Alzheimer's disease. Research participation is frequently diagnosed based, which means, for example, many caregiver support studies that are funded by our tax dollars are requiring that the person have a clear diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, when many of these same supports would be relevant without regard to what of the type of dementia that somebody has. Personalized medicine is trending, and perhaps to me, that's the most important reason for this community to find its voice, both individually and otherwise. I have to say, it's finding our voice, it's telling our story, and hopefully we've given you some points, some particular points to why it's important for this community to talk about FTD and its unique difficulties as you work with your decision makers. Thank you again, Deb and Matt. I think it's back to you.
Thanks, Mike. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about the specific policy areas that AFT is going to focus on and what's going to happen next couple of months. But for the sake of time, I am going to try and speed through these, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for some Q&A. So we've been actively working on building our advocacy agenda. We're forming a policy committee of our board. We know we're not going to be able to solve or take on all the issues, so we need some criteria for figuring out how to set priorities and choose what are the things we're going to take on. Next slide. We know there's going to be sort of three main buckets that all the issues are going to be falling into. One of them is research. And again, there's a difference between the issue and the specific pieces of legislation. What's on the right here is really just examples based on what's going on currently. It's not exactly what our agenda is going to include, but we know that FTD research at is going to be an ongoing issue. Next slide. We know that dementia care and services is going to be a continuing issue. We know that this is all primarily driven through National Institute of Aging, which translates into Alzheimer's essentially. So that's another area where our voice is going to be needed. Next slide. And then caregiving overall is increasingly getting more and more attention. I mentioned the Raise Family Caregiver Act already. There's currently a national strategy for family caregivers. So this is, again, another area where our voice is going to be needed to remind people that it's not just an issue of aging. There's a far wider range of issues involved in caregiving than most people realize. Next slide. And then there's going to be state level advocacy that we want to do. You know, we can't take on issues in all 50 states. So again, there's going to be some choosing that's going on. So we're going to try and find targeted legislation that has, you know, strategic value for the community as a whole. Next slide. Currently, we've been running some targeted advocacy campaigns, and we just launched the most recent one, which has to do with the National Alzheimer's Project Reauthorization Act. If you haven't already, please visit our Advocacy Action Center, sign up, and send messages to your legislators telling them to please move the reauthorization of NAPA along. Even though it is by name focused on Alzheimer's, it's a real vital activity that is brought a lot of benefits to FTD. Next slide. And again, if you haven't already, please check out our new Action Center, our website, and sign up for our action alerts. Like I said, we have one currently focused on the reauthorization of NAPA, but we have some others coming up soon at the state level. So there's a lot of things going on. And by signing up through our website, it's going to be the best way to keep in touch. So I know that was a bit of a whirlwind, but I will turn it back over to Megan. Before we all come.
Thank you. No, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Deb. Hopefully Deb is joining us back live. Did want to open it up. I know that we are technically at time, but did want to open it up to any questions. We have gotten a few questions from those of you in Canada. So it's looking like there's a lot of Canadians that are looking maybe to join forces. Currently, our public policy agenda and efforts are US focused. But happy to talk to our friends in Canada to discuss any ways that we might be able to work with you all and figure out, you know, how to replicate our efforts here in Canada. So as always, you can email advocacy@theaftd.org with any questions or any requests for additional conversations. I think I'm seeing some of the questions. It's really about the slides. I know the slides will be posted, like I said, on our YouTube channel. So, and if there's anything specifically in the slides that you're looking for, I'm happy to, again, reach out to advocacy@theaftd.org.
I'd just point out that Canada has a very robust national dementia strategy that's funded and is a major player in dementia research of all kinds. And every province has a province dementia strategy. And there are many innovations in the province of Ontario that I envy, wish could happen here in the United States. So that, and I can get links to that and get that to the team to share with the Canadians.
That would be fantastic. If there are any questions pertaining to FTD, I encourage you to reach out to our helpline, which I know is on the next slide. I am seeing just a lot of thank yous. Appreciate that. Definitely thanking all of you. I did want to put into the chat, I put a couple of things in the chat already. One is our state resolution toolkit, awareness resolution toolkit, and one is just the direct link for you to sign up to be an advocate, take participate in our action alert on Napa, as Matt discussed. And I do also have, we will be hosting a couple of sessions on April 2nd. For any additional questions, or if anyone's interested in joining us in a more informal setting, so not a webinar setting, but more of a meeting setting where we can all see each other, meet each other, talk to each other, and answer specific questions that you may have about anything that was covered tonight, or really anything related to policy, advocacy, etc., that we would be more than happy to answer, and also have, you know, an informal discussion or chat with you all. So you can register for those sessions. There's one at 2 p.m. Eastern and one at 7 p.m. Eastern on April 2nd. Encourage you to click on those links if you're interested. And I just want to, let me just take one more look and see.
Hey, Megan, there was a
some
question
questions.
about focusing on the younger cases of FTD versus the older, which I think is a really good point. One of the unique features of FTD is that it is, you know, does start earlier than Alzheimer's, and a lot of those issues are unique in FTD, but we understand that it does span that magical age of retirement, and so there's also a lot of overlap, right, between the issues that AFTD wants to get involved with and ones that are already being sort of spearheaded by other organizations like the Alzheimer's Association. So, you know, joining coalitions and other organizations' efforts, especially around a lot of the aging issues, is important, and it's definitely something that we would encourage everybody to take advantage of when they can.
Thank you, Matt. I'm going to wrap up the webinar now. Be mindful of everyone's time. I know for most or all of us on the East Coast, you know, it's after 8 o'clock, perhaps my bedtime. I don't know. I just want to thank everyone who did submit a question. And of course, a huge thank you to Deb Scharper, Mike Splaine, and Matt Sharp for being here and sharing their knowledge and experiences and expertise today. Before we go, we do have one final polling question that we would like to launch, just to see if your understanding of public policy advocacy has increased at all based on this webinar. If it hasn't, that's okay. We are really just getting started with our advocacy program and building our network of advocates, and we really do want to be here with you every step of the way. There will be additional educational opportunities and training opportunities for everyone, and just invite you all to come along for the ride with us. And I see, okay, significantly, that's great. After watching this webinar, significantly, people are feeling a little bit better. At least no one said not at all. So I consider that that's successful for sure. We will be sending out a post-webinar survey with those links to register for the April 2nd sessions. Encourage you all to please fill it out, give us some feedback. This is our first one, so thank you for your patience and grace, and we look forward to doing more of these with you. And at this time, this concludes today's webinar. Thank you all so much.